mashing up apples, making that sauce, making videos for all the haters. Made 2 batches today. Took pictures of one. You're welcome. So, oh, that's my dryer alarm going off. I will have to go out there and address that pretty soon. So, a couple weeks ago, Bountiful Baskets had an add-on of a 40-pound box of Fuji apples, and it was a pretty good price. Don't remember what it was, just remember that it was much cheaper than the grocery stores at the time, including Sprouts. So I bought it, and I'd been working on a project for the past 2 weeks, like ridiculously working on a project, and hadn't had a chance to make applesauce out of the apples. And so now I have started to make them in haste, and I made 2 batches today. So the first time that I did this, I purchased a 30-some pound box of organic Gala apples through Bountiful Baskets. Those apples were gigantic. They were as big as my fist, and it took like 10 of them to make 5 pounds worth of applesauce. I think it was 5 pounds. I can't remember exactly what the weight was. I had weighed them, and then I processed them, and then weighed them again, and saw to see like how much apple I'm losing, and it wasn't all that much. It wasn't as much as I thought it was. These, on the other hand, okay, so we're going to talk about how to make applesauce. Previously, the old apples, the first set that I bought, like I said, giant apples, it took 10 of them to make 1 batch of applesauce. These are tiny little apples. It takes 25 of them to make a batch of applesauce. So it's a lot more work up front. So step 1, you'll wash all of your apples. And here you can even see the little drops of water still upon them. And I let them sit to dry because the first batch was cooking while these were sitting here. So they just kind of sat there. All right, so you're going to need some tools. You need a peeler, or you can use a knife in place of a peeler, but I think the peeler just works faster. If you are one of those awesome people who knows how to skin an apple using a paring knife, I know how to do it. I'm just not at all good at doing it. And so I can use my vegetable peeler to do it pretty quickly. You need a paring knife, just in case. You don't need, but it helps to have one of these apple core and slicer doohickeys. Once again, if you don't have this, you can just use a knife. In this case, probably a little bit larger of a knife, especially if you're using bigger apples. And then you need a potato masher. This is a Pampered Chef one that my mom bought me once at a home and garden show. And so that's why it might look different than what you're used to, but anything might work. Okay, so what you do, you take your apple, and whether you're using a knife or the vegetable peeler, the first step is you cut right off the top. So with a knife, usually you slide it right across the top, but you don't come all the way off. You leave, like right here, this little bit of skin attached here, and then you start sliding the knife around in a spiral pattern, and you take literally the entire skin of the apple off in one giant piece. It's just, very long spiral line. But when you're using the vegetable peeler to do it, you just right across the top. If the stems are long, pluck them out, twist them out, cut them with a pair of scissors or something, because they can like jam up the works if you're doing it. These all pretty much have very short stems, so you just one across the top. And then I found that going in just broad lines straight down results in the least amount of apple lost while you're taking the peel off. I used to go in strips horizontally, and that just seemed to take off too much apple. And it helps that these apples, for the most part, were rather tall and cylindrical. I suppose if you had a rounder apple, it might change things, but yeah, long strips works pretty well. So yeah, peel it all the way. You don't have to get every single tiny bit of the skin. You can have tiny little bits of skin left on. Doesn't need to be perfect. If you see any large bruises or anything on the apple, you can use the paring knife to just excise it really quickly, because I took a bit of it out of here. And that's it. And then you start piling them up. Now, this is a slow cooker, otherwise often called a crock pot, but a crock pot is a particular brand of slow cooker. And I know how many apples it takes to fit into the slow cooker. if you don't know how many apples your slow cooker can hold, what you do is you will slice them up, as we're going to in the next photo, and you just put them in the crock pot or slow cooker until you fill it, and then you'll know that's how many you need, and then pour them from the slow cooker into another bowl to do the next steps after that. But since I know how many I need, I just, as I peel them, I stick them in here, and then I will then slice them up and dump them into the bowl. Because essentially you kind of need 2 containers for it. If you're going to go peel all of them, slice all of them, process all of them in a row. I think it's the most efficient way to do so. So anyway, you peel your apples, and once again you can see that some of them still have little tiny bits of skin on. Doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. And we are about to core them. So this, the middle bits with the stems in that they're going to disappear. So you take your apple, place it on your cutting board, why is that not advancing? Hello. There we go. Put the core on and split the apple straight down, just like that. And you'll get a nice little bit of slices. You'll have the core left. You just toss the core away. If you have a compost heap, use that. I live in an apartment, so I cannot have a compost heap. And then dump them in the bowl. For me, because I know how many apples it takes to fill my slow cooker, I just dump them straight into the bowl first. Otherwise, like I said, fill up the slow cooker till it's full. Then go ahead and dump them into the bowl. You actually technically don't even need to dump them in the bowl. The bowl just makes it easier. All right, so sometimes when you're using these cores, especially if you have bigger apples that are going to have a bigger core, you might find that you're slicing through and those parts of the seed pod, if not the seed itself, are here. And those are the little bits from the center, the core of the apple that are hard. And so you don't want necessarily those going into the applesauce because they're not going to break down very well. And you might end up with these hard bits in there. So that's where I'll use the paring knife and just gut the middle part where that remnant of the core still is and throw them in. All right, so 2 more ingredients you're going to need. You're going to need some lemon juice. You can also use orange juice. You can technically use vinegar. I wouldn't necessarily recommend vinegar. And then you need some cinnamon if you want to make cinnamon-flavored applesauce, which is what I like. So I have some cinnamon. This is from the Savory Spice Shop. I purchased it a long time ago, and I still have not worked my way through it because I bought 2 ounces, which is like this much of the bag full. And it's a very strong cinnamon. It even says here, Saigon is a strong cinnamon. So scale back. And for sure, when this is fresh, you really, really, really want to scale back. All right, so what you're going to put in here is you're going to, once you've got all the apples cut, and unfortunately I didn't take a picture of all of the apples piled in the bowl before I added the other ingredients. So you pile up all your apples in the bowl, and you can see this bowl is pretty full. And then you pour a tablespoon worth of lemon juice on the apples and stir them up to make sure that they all get a little bit coated with the lemon juice. And then you're going to sprinkle 1/4 teaspoon up to 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon on them. And so here I sprinkle them, and then I stir them, and then I sprinkle them again and stir them again, just trying to get a good even coating on all of them. So then after they're stirred up, they get transferred into the slow cooker. I add 1/4 cup of water at this point, and that's to help with a little bit of steam and liquid in there while you're starting them up. Because otherwise, if it's just the bare apples on the bottom, supposedly they can start like roasting rather than steaming and breaking down, which is what you want them to do. So I guess the water helps prevent some of the burnt. I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, stick them into your slow cooker, put the lid on, put it to high heat, and then you're going to cook it. And depending on your slow cooker, it can take 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, maybe a little bit longer. My slow cooker tends to cook down in about 3 to 4 hours. So halfway through the cooking, you can see the moisture and stuff on the top. You're going to stir the apples a bit. I don't know if it's absolutely necessary, but it just seems like a good idea since they're cooking for so long, and the heating element of a slow cooker tends to be on the bottom more so. At this point, you'll kind of get an idea of how softened the apple slices are. Oh, I should point out, I guess I'll go back to this step. Oh my gosh, why does this keep undoing? All right, so when you're at this point and you're cutting the apples up, for small apples, putting them into these slices just works because they're these tiny little slices. They're like the size of your finger, well, for me, it's my pinky finger. I'm not sure which finger for you guys. But if you're using big apples, like when I was making it with those 10 big apples to fill this entire bowl with apples, I was cutting each of these slices in half or in thirds. You don't want the pieces to be too big, basically. The smaller they are, the faster they're going to cook through. All right, so about halfway through, you stir it. When I stirred this, it was about an hour and a half through the cooking time, and the apples still felt as crisp as they did when they went in. But once they do start to break down, the process seems to go pretty quickly. Because I've gotten into these where I think it was about at 2.5 to 3 hours, I stirred them and they felt very crisp, and I came back in like half an hour and they immediately started to feel much mushier. And so I guess there's like a plateau, and once you hit that plateau, then suddenly they soften much faster. So this is at about 3.5 hours of cooking. 3 hours, 3.5 hours. And you can see I've used the masher in the side of the pot here and just mashed down a couple times, and you can see that the apples are easily breaking up into little pieces. And so that tells, and you can feel the resistance. The longer you cook it, the softer they'll be, the easier it is to mash them up, the smoother you can make the applesauce. The shorter the cooking time, the harder it is. And it shouldn't, I guess, you shouldn't be trying to smash them if they're hard at all. They're just going to be slightly less mushy, I should say. You could also say more firm, technically correct, but not as descriptive as less mushy. And all of this liquid down here, this is a good quarter of the way up the pot, quarter to third. A lot of that is the apples now have broken down and you have that liquid. When the apples are still firm in the beginning, you've put a quarter cup in. A quarter cup in this 4 quart, 4 liter slow cooker is just barely going to touch the bottom. It's not going to have an appreciable liquid level to it. So this is all apple juice that's come out of the broken down apples. So go ahead and use your potato masher. If you're in a slow cooker and you're doing it in the pot like I do, I would prefer a plastic implement like my masher. If you have one of those waveform potato mashers that's metal, I would be scared of mashing down and scratching the bottom of the pot. But if you have one that might have some that's just plastic, it should work fine. So you mash them up and it turns into applesauce, chunky applesauce. The less time you cook it, the chunkier you can make it, because the apples will still be a little bit more firm. And of course, the less you mash it, the chunkier it will be as well. I like a chunky applesauce, but I'm not too big of a fan of having the chunks be like crunchy. I just want larger chunks of mushy apple, essentially. If you're someone like my resident at work, she complained the first time I brought applesauce in because she's like, oh, I don't normally like chunky applesauce. And when she says I don't normally like, she means I don't like chunky applesauce. And I was like, well, that's too bad because that's the kind I make. But if you don't like the chunks at all, you have some kind of aversion to the mouth feel of chunky applesauce, you can throw it in a blender, throw it in a food processor after it cools down maybe. I don't know, maybe you could put it in there while it's still warm. Probably not like while it's boiling hot out of the slow cooker. And just blend it or food process it until it's smooth. I like a chunkier one though. Tastes better. Another thing is, at least for me, the apples that I've purchased and for my own personal taste, it's super sweet on its own. But if you do happen to have apples that maybe aren't as sweet, or after you cook it, let it cool down. While it's still warm, it's not going to taste as sweet, at least from what I've found. When I tasted the first pot that I made from this box of apples, it was still warm, and I thought it wasn't that sweet. And so you can add a quarter cup of sugar. for this 4-quart recipe. You can add a 1/4 cup of sugar. And I did that, and then once it cooled down, it was way sweeter. So I added the 1/4 cup of sugar while it was still warm, stirred it up, tasted okay, and then it cooled down, and then it tasted way sweeter. So that was the only batch I'd add sugar to. Every other batch of applesauce I've made from the previous box and the follow-up ones from this box, no sugar, and they've been perfectly sweet. No complaints from me. You can always add sugar. You can't take it out. So there you go. That's how you make applesauce. You let it cool off. The best way to let these cool off is, one, take the pot out of the heating element for the slow cooker. And if you have one of the coil burners for your stovetop, put it on that, because the coil means that there will be air passing beneath it. Or if you happen to have some kind of trivet or trivet, I'm not sure what the pronunciation is, that would leave space underneath, that'll help the pot cool faster. Otherwise, if you just put it down on a hot pad, it's going to not cool off from the bottom quite as much, and that's where the main heating element for a slow cooker is. So the hottest part is the bottom. And of course, you can stir it occasionally, and that'll help to cool it off faster as well. Once it's cooled down enough, you transfer it into a bowl. This happens to be a 1.6 liter or 7-cup plastic Rubbermaid container, which happens to just about perfectly fit one batch of applesauce. So I think it's beautiful. My slow cooker, if you fill it to the brim with apples, cooks down and makes exactly this container size worth of applesauce. So yeah, my current batch right now, the one that we've taken pictures of, this one is sitting on the burner on my stove. Obviously it's off. And this is the batch from this morning that I had transferred into this container immediately before starting this batch. So there you go. That is how you make applesauce in a slow cooker. Bunch of apples, as many as it to fill up your slow cooker. For a 4-quart recipe, you add a 1/4 cup of water, a tablespoon of lemon juice, and a 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and that's it. If you happen to have a 6-quart slow cooker, scale the recipe up. It's not really, there's not really much to it. It's just a little bit of water to get it started, a little bit of cinnamon for flavor, and a little bit of lemon juice to prevent it from discoloring. And all is well with the world. Just as a spoiler, something else I made today. This, which looks like a pan full of gravel, is actually called overnight French toast. It is a bunch of pieces of bread, and then you put eggs and milk and vanilla, and you with some sugar mixed in, and you pour that mixture over the top. And then you take some flour, some sugar, and a stick of butter, and some cinnamon, and you chop it up, and that gives you this crumble topping. And then you put that on top, and then you bake it. And then it comes out looking like this, and it's delicious. It's super sweet, though. I got the recipe from The Pioneer Woman, who's a TV show my mom watches on the Food Network, I think. And yeah, it's really good, and but ridiculously bad for you. And that's what I made. But I didn't get to take pictures of that because there's really nothing to take pictures of. It's cut up bread, pour mixture over top, and then you're done after you bake it. It doesn't just pop up like this once you pour the two things into the pan. Until next time, bye-bye.